stage. Also here in Berlin. Mischa Leinkauf is an artist based here in Berlin. At the exhibition Terrestrial Assemblage, he presents his video work Fiction of a Non-Entry from 2020, in which he crosses the non-invisible border on the seabed between Israel and Jordan and Egypt in the Red Sea, as well as between the Spanish enclave of Ceuta and Morocco in the Straits of Gibraltar, which are militarily guarded by border fortification controls. In his work, Mischa Leinkauf questions the sense and nonsense of drawing borders of national identities and territories, especially in the 21st century. Through interventions in public space or natural environments, he provokes situations that create temporary irritation. He usually seeks physical access to political and architectural border spaces in order to temporarily override them. For the symposium, Mischa will present selected works that question how formatted and purpose-driven our public spaces are today. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for staying with us, to the audience. Okay, that seemed to work. Great. Yeah, right, thanks for the introduction. I am basically working with like the limits of space and boundaries within spaces. And I'm... Hello again.
Yeah.
Okay, so once again, I basically work with the limits of space and boundaries within spaces. Also like the borders between public spaces and non-public spaces. I'm not going into like the idea of public spaces right now. I'm just thought of introducing a couple of works that deal with the exhibition content here right now. So let's start with a quite old work. Oh no, did I start with this one? No, I start with going to the underground, right? So lots of our like spaces where we usually like walk and live are surrounded by areas that nobody knows and nobody can usually see. Quite simple example of this is like going into the underground in like in urban spaces. This, for instance, is an image what you can see here in the middle of Berlin, like just going to a gutter and exploring a kind of world and system of underground tunnels, like rainwater system. And this brings me to a work which is called Endogenous Error Terms, which started 7 years ago and brought me in different countries and different, also on different continents, into these water canals right under cities. Mr. Seliger today in the morning also talked about that a lot of like rivers and like small creeks that usually or used to run through cities were built underground into like kind of canals or tunnels in order to like have property on top to like build buildings, whatever, commercializing it. And this happens all over the world. So this series of images that I did, and also this is also a video work, started in Tokyo in 2011 or 13. Oh my God, it's too long time ago. And for 7 years I made research and tried to explore and find in different cities all over the world places that are underground, like rainwater canals, and trying to explore these architecture, the atmosphere, the sound, the smell, and sometimes also the like animals living there, like turtles and stuff like this. So it's not the birds anymore that go into these tunnels, but different kinds of animals still live there. So, and what was important for me, hello? What was important for me is like to find places that lead, that have an exit to a kind of daily life situation, as you can see here, which is somewhere in Munich. This is in the middle, like inside a tunnel, and like outside is a kind of recreational like park, or like it's quite close to the English Garden in Munich, where you can observe somehow like daily life situations from within a city, but it's like part of our cities, but it's like actually not known. And there are beautiful architectures. We're back to Tokyo here right now, which kind of looks like a spaceship, at least to me. This, oh my God, was it in Florence? I don't remember exactly. This is in Athens. So 7 years of research, trying to understand like how, like what different parts of a city or different parts of urban. Should I use this new mic? Hello, 1, 2, 3. Better. What kind of different parts in a city are about to explore that nobody knows, and trying to catch this atmosphere. So I'm quite hands-on artist. Like I really need to go there to feel, to touch, to smell, like these kind of places. From that work, this is in Siberia, in Ekaterinburg, for instance, Florence, Tokyo again, Moscow. Okay. Next work, which is quite an old work from, oh God, once again, I forgot from when it was, 2011 or something like this. It's called Drifter. It's a couple of years ago. I used to work in an artist studio for quite a while. So this is a work from my former artist studio, Mischa Leinkauf. It's called Drifter, and it's the idea. It's not about like going underground, but exploring a different kind of like urban landscape. In this case, like roofs, like the top of the city. So what we did back then, also in different countries all over the world, trying to like drift and walk on top of a city, like always like between bridges, between like roofs, and kind of this stuff, like finding architecture that you usually don't walk on, and making a kind of work that like to imagine that there's like more space that we're usually like walking. What's also like in all of the works that I'm basically doing is this idea of having a kind of like free movement. So not being blocked by any kind of barriers, by any kind of like systems or laws or rules, like it used to be before like the global world actually used to be before there were political borders and things like this. So in my artistic practice, usually I try to see the world, or like urban environments, or whatever you call it, also like in rural landscape areas, to not feel blocked or stopped by any kind of like barriers, which might be like a kind of rule, which might be an architectural barrier, or like kind of like barrier just in my head, because I don't feel like just going there or crossing that kind of place. Also like nature-wise, like where you maybe cannot breathe anymore because it's like deep in the water, where which brings me to the next work. I'm going to this here quickly. Yeah, as you can see, usually like I'm like working quite extensively like on like this one basic idea, and then like trying to find a lot of locations to for. Oh, please.
Before by Shira, I wonder, is there kind of like when you go through a city, when you explore a new space or something, how do you find this place, and how do you feel that this is the spot where you want to do a work?
Whenever I go to a different city that I don't know, I usually feel quite uncomfortable because I don't feel home. As everybody, as a tourist, you just try to observe, try to understand like how these city works. What I mostly do, because this is how I grew up somehow, like also in Berlin. I grew up in Berlin, like in the early 90s, and like this was part of my daily life to explore the city in a different kinds of ways and like climb to roofs or go to different kinds of tunnels. So what I still do nowadays, I try to find some places where I get like easily access to. For instance, let's make it an example. Like within Tokyo, I really got lost. The first time in Tokyo, I don't remember 2010 or something like this. I completely got lost because this city was just too much to me. Um, so what I did was trying to figure out how to get like to some roofs first of all, in order to like get some like calm situations to just observe, because down in the streets was just really seriously too much for me. And like finding this, I realized that there is a different kind of architecture in Tokyo, for instance, because they have this earthquake problem. Like every day there are some kind of mini earthquakes. So they all have like emergency stairways, usually to the roofs. So mostly every roof is accessible, which I just found out by accident. So I just tried and figured out because I was interested to go up. And by being on some of these places, like within a couple of days, you feel way more home, even if you don't know the city. Like when I passed this and I realized, wait a second, yesterday or the day before, I was up that roof, so I feel home because it makes this. I have like a little connection to this kind of cities. So by this quite simple and also quite naive way of exploring, I find a lot of spaces that might be interesting for future work. So, um, and like this kind of tunnel work, like in the beginning, in the Genos error terms, there was a specific reason to start exploring this kind of thing. So it's started in also in Tokyo, and I went there right after the big earthquake, the Fukushima, the Tohoku earthquake, which caused the Fukushima issue. And I was interested in if there is like urban spaces in the city that might be work as a kind of shelter, because everybody was talking about like where to hide when all this like radioactive like rain is coming down and all this kind of stuff. I didn't find kind of shelter places, but I found something else, like this system of water canals. And then after making research about how it happened that all these canals were built, I started to do this all over the world. So this is, I mean, yeah, yeah. Actually, I always like when I see a door or like a kind of gutter or like something in the streets, I try to open, and if it's open, I just go there to take a look what's there, because there's so many places and so much interesting places that we usually don't see. Okay, I go on with the last work, which brings us to the work which is shown here in the exhibition, which is called Fiction of a Non-Entry, which brought me underwater and where I was crossing highly secured nation-state borders, but found a kind of loophole in this like border systems, because like right behind where the border ends and these kind of borders where I went to leads into an ocean. Like here, this is exactly between Morocco and Spain in the Spanish enclave called Ceuta on the African continent. On the left-hand side, you see this is actually the country of Spain, and on the right-hand side, it's Morocco. So what I did was crossing borders without using passports, without using or like dealing with all these like permission ideas, and I migrated from one country to another, and also went back underwater. It just came today to the news that exactly at this border, I should have taken the picture, because exactly at this fence that you can see, like there is a picture in the news today, because almost 5,000 migrants started to go over by swimming these days, going over exactly this border, what you can see here, because the Morocco like police and border control like stopped controlling it because of some political issues, I don't go into that right now, but it's still, even if for the last 1.5 years we didn't talk about that issue that much, but it's still a huge issue. So what I did was trying to find out, like, what's the space behind that fence here. So something about like 50 meters behind it. I hope you can see it.
On the screens at home.
Here on the screen it's a little bit too dark. There is a place that is more or less still like it used to be before political borders were erected. So usually the only thing that you can see is like kind of like marking a border. In this image, like you see a line that leads to a buoy that is on top of the, like on the water level, which marks the borderline. And I used also I did a photo series and a video work that is on view here in the exhibition, like crossing the borders from one, just walking, wandering like from one country to another. This image is between Israel and Egypt, where also just can see some like metal constructions wherever they come from. So there's literally no difference between both countries, like underwater, and also ecologically, they are like fishes, like animals, plants. Like it looks like quite free area. The starting point to this work was that I read something that is actually not a secret, but it made so many things clear to me. Like, remember 1989 when the Berlin Wall fall and the Iron Curtain fall, like the globe was like feeling that this world becomes now more open. A lot of borders are going to fall, and there will be way more freedom. Back in the days, we had 16 barriers between countries or cities. 16. So guess how many we have nowadays?
I think I read it somewhere 70, 80.
Yeah, up to almost 80 right now. So even this is actually no secret. You can read about this, but it's not that present in our heads somehow. At least it wasn't in mine. So from that point, I thought of like dealing with this kind of issue and trying to find out if there's a loophole also in this kind of system. So this is Jordan and Israel, like between Jordan and Israel. And this was the wrong one. So I would close with this work, and I hope you will still be able to see this exhibition and the work in real life.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you said something very important there at the end, because I think that we might not see how many borders are existing when having also the privilege of having a German passport sometimes. I think there's some like there is something that I would like to raise today as well, as a question of like moving. You change perspective very oftenly. You change perspective from a top level, from a lower level, from like walking between lines that other people don't really get access to. And I think there is a very interesting part in there that you can actually access. You don't apply, you have this German passport and you can go from one place to another in the first place in order to have the possibility to explore spaces, which is kind of something that I think is also raised here today. It's just so complex and difficult to think about people who need to apply for anything on such huge administrative and bureaucratic levels. That there is something about that which I find interesting in your practice, because when you go diving through the ocean and you see that the view from down under is literally the same if you cross a border here or there, it doesn't really matter. It opens up exactly to that discussion. You don't need a visa, you can overcome or undergo these borders in a way. And this is what it makes so fascinating to me, that it's...
It actually I have to refer a bit to Santiago Sierra's talk, like an hour or 2 hours ago, because he said something really interesting. Because he said he's doing works, usually like artists doing works because they like or love something, and he's doing works because he hates something. This is...
How is it for you?
No, it's a little bit. I mean, I'm not hating stuff, but things I care for, and that I feel like there is like we should talk about this, or we should discuss this, or to like make something visible that like goes back and forth in my head. Like, I wouldn't say I mean, yes, I hate this kind of like situation, but I also at the same time I know how privileged I am with my German passport, like being a white male, like with a German passport. So also, I was quite happy about this, but at the same time, I realized that, hey, wait a second, like a lot of people are not able to do this. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah. And I think now I would like to open up just one more question also to Shira, if she's still here. Yeah, she's there. Because I think there is something very fascinating also between your both practices that I saw before. Also speaking to you, I had the feeling that there is this exploration of like language in a different realm and how the body is perceived. And I think, Shira, I would like to ask you the question how this work of yours going into the planetary realm, or also discussing about matter as a body, and you, Mischa, like moving as a body, as a physical body through the world, has kind of comparisons to each other, because I see that there's both kind of like a fluid way of changing things while doing these very poetic but simple interventions with matter, like sometimes with yourself, with your own bodies, sometimes with discussing with other entities that we might not think of being able to discuss to. And yeah, this is what I would like to know. How did you change this perspective? When did that happen? How did this interest in talking, for example, to matter, or trying to give it a sense, or trying to understand if there's any kind of capacity of exchanging ideas with different matters together? How do you approach that?
Should I start? So for me, I think it's more. I'm basically interested in like bringing into visible what we cannot see or what we cannot even sense as human, but it still matter, and it affects us if we know or if we don't know. So I think for me that was the beginning of my interest around it, and it started with plants and with memory, which is a matter that I think create this world. So I think it's try to feel this other dimension of reality which we just not able to feel or sense.
And I understood. Oh, what happened there? Hello? Yeah. And I understood also that at the moment you're working on the one hand on a PhD, as well as you work on your artistic practice, which you like there is overlaps, but you separate also both of them in like the language you choose and you use. And we had an interesting discussion about like what is coming up here today as well as an interdisciplinary symposium. I somehow have the feeling like looking at the data of the analysts and looking at the scientific approach of together somehow. I think it's making a lot of sense to bring these different perspectives today together in order to understand how the different approaches come. Because when you say there's a moment before, I think the researchers need to work with the moment after, because they need to work with facts and analyzing things. And I think this is interesting with...
Just to say something about this. I think the moment before and the moment after, for me, it's the same moment. It's of course it's diffract, so it's change, but it's still definitely they are entangled, and they are what create actually the present for me. So, but I do think that it's interesting to see also maybe more than interesting, important to collaborate between artists and research and scientists, because it's. I think for me to work only with reality will be impossible. I mean, it's just too much to contain. At the moment, for example, with Israel-Palestine, it's just too much. So, and in general, I think so. It's create an openness for something to imagine, something different that is possible, and maybe bring in creativity, which is definitely already in science. But yeah.
You want to add something?
No.
Okay, I think that was actually very, very nicely said. Thank you, because I think there is this nice, fusion to entangle these different notions. Nice, thank you very much. I think that we already need to continue. We have a tight schedule today.